Leigh, welcome to the Kind Mind series. It's really lovely to have you here today talking to us about sleep. And I have to admit, I've been really looking forward to this topic as someone who does struggle with sleep. So I'm looking forward to all the tips that you're going to give us.
Thanks for having me here, Jess. It's really lovely to see you. And I've also been really looking forward to being here and having the opportunity to talk to you about sleep and why it's important, and also to think about some ways that we can improve our sleep. I've been working with students in higher education for the past 6 years, and sleeping problems and sleep disturbance is something that comes up time and time again. So I think it's really important to address it. I've also noticed during COVID-19, during this really difficult time that we've been going through, there have been more students reporting sleeping difficulties. I think that's quite understandable. There's a lot more anxiety. There's been a massive disruption to our usual routines, and also a change in our living situations, particularly for many of the students that I'm working with.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that anyone watching this who does suffer with sleep issues isn't alone. And for many, I'm sure that, if they've had existing sleep issues, that for the last few weeks and months, that perhaps those have been exacerbated. And I'm sure there are also many students watching who have just started to notice difficulties in their sleep over the last few weeks and months. So it's really good to be able to discuss this today. You said that students do report these different sleep issues. So I'm just wondering what kind of things that are reported.
There are a range of sleep problems that students report. Some are having problems falling asleep, others are reporting sleep disturbance, so they might be waking a number of times in the night. I have students who are experiencing insomnia, or some that are actually sleeping too much or finding it really hard to wake up. I found actually during lockdown in particular, many students were talking about their routines being so disrupted. They're not able to go to lectures or go to the library, and what they were finding is actually they were studying very late into the night and maybe going to bed at 4 or 5 in the morning. So there's been a real change in the time that they're actually going to bed.
Yeah, and it's really good then just to clarify that it's not just issues getting to sleep or not sleeping that we're talking about, but also the quality of sleep, which is still really, really important. So why are we talking about this? Why is sleep so important?
Well, it's a very good question, Jess. And, we know that sleep impacts every single aspect of our lives. It affects every biological process in our bodies. It impacts our concentration, our ability to learn, our memory, our ability to problem solve. So lots of the functions that are essential for study. It also impacts our mood and our ability to regulate our emotions, and that can make us feel much more irritable and much less patient. And of course, those sorts of things can impact our relationships as well with the people around us.
Yeah.
It can be so hard to cope when you've not slept well, and really hard to feel resilient when we're sleep deprived. We know that sleep has a huge impact on our physical health as well, and actually, when we have good sleep, it can boost our immune system, and there's research that shows it can prevent diseases like diabetes and cancer and heart disease. Good sleep can also help regulate our weight as well. So there's lots of different areas, to consider when we think about why sleep is important. There's a sleep expert called Professor Matthew Walker, and he is a professor of neuroscience at the University of California, Berkeley. And he argues that actually, rather than being one of the pillars of health alongside diet and exercise, he sees sleep to be actually the foundation upon which the other pillars of diet and exercise sit. So if we think of sleep in this way, it's really easy to understand why it's important to prioritize our sleep.
Yeah, of course. And it's interesting to sort of look at it alongside those other things that we know are really important. And we don't hear as much about sleep. But it does make a lot of sense, sort of describing it as a foundation, because when I think about how I feel when I've slept badly, you are much less likely to do that exercise or to keep moving. And you're probably going to be reaching for things that aren't as healthy to go into your body, whether that's caffeine or sugar. So it's just very eye-opening to just sort of realise how important sleep is. I'm sure as well that many students will be interested in that link you made between sleep and productivity when studying. So I'm interested to know, is it important to prioritize a good sleep? And if that means, working less hours, is that better than, say, for students who study in the evenings and maybe work really late into the night and therefore get less sleep? Is it better to prioritize our sleep and work less? Is that going to be more productive?
It certainly is more productive to prioritize your sleep. And it, if you stay up late studying and you don't sleep, then you're going to have difficulties with your concentration and your memory, and you're going to be less creative and less able to problem solve. So actually, you're not going to be as effective or productive when you're studying. So, I would say definitely prioritize your sleep. And actually then what it will mean is that when you study, you're going to be able to do much better with your studies and be much more productive. There was actually a study in 2017 that showed that the area of your brain that is responsible for learning new skills is hugely impacted by sleep quality. So yes, definitely prioritize your sleep.
Yeah. Okay, so it's very clear then that sleeping well, sleeping easy is crucial for our health and our well-being and also our functioning. You also mentioned that sleep affects mood, and I'm just quite intrigued by this. So do you mind sort of explaining that more?
Of course. We know that people who are sleep deprived or who have had disrupted or poor quality of sleep report an increase in experiencing more negative emotions and moods. So they report more sadness, irritability, frustration and anger. Yeah. But also sleep deprivation is also associated with greater emotional reactivity. And as I mentioned before, that difficulty in actually being able to regulate your emotions and your moods. So when you have that combination, it can feel much more difficult to feel happy, to enjoy positive things in our life. I think also one of the things that can happen is it can feel like a vicious cycle. You might find yourself feeling agitated or anxious during the day, and then that can really interfere with your ability to fall asleep when it is time to go to bed.
Yeah.
The link between mood and sleep has been researched for many years. The Sleep Foundation report actually that people with insomnia are 10 times more likely to have clinical depression and 17 times more likely to have clinical anxiety. So there's a real strong correlation.
Yeah, wow. And those numbers are very big. So there clearly is a strong link there. And I'm sure that hearing that, could actually be quite anxiety inducing for some students who struggle with their sleep, or perhaps there are people listening going, I didn't realize sleep was actually this important and possibly is affecting me in all these different areas. So what advice can we give to students to help improve their sleep so they can sleep easier and sleep better?
I think the first piece of advice would be not to panic. If you're experiencing sleeping difficulties and you're hearing this information about the impact of sleep, I really encourage you as much as you can to try not to worry and try not to panic, because actually the good news is that if you're experiencing sleeping difficulties and problems with your sleep, actually most of these are caused by our lifestyle, our modern lifestyle and our routine. So what that means is that you can make changes to those things and it can make a big difference to your sleep. And that's what I'm going to move on to talk about today in this discussion with you. It's about, what areas of our lives can we make some changes that will help.
Okay.
So the first area or the first tip would be about your lifestyle. So just really encourage you to reflect on your lifestyle and how what you put into your body might be affecting your sleep. There are some really simple things that you can do during the day that will help you sleep. One of those is to ensure that you spend time outside and get enough natural light during the day. That supports our sleep-wake cycle, our natural circadian rhythm, and that can not only help us fall asleep more quickly, but it can also improve our quality of sleep. Now, during this lockdown period, it's been much more difficult for some people to go outside. Obviously, we were all restricted from going outside at a certain point, but also if you're shielding for health reasons, or perhaps you're living with someone that's shielding, you might not be able to go outside, or you might actually feel quite anxious going outside. So if you're not able to actually get outside, there's still things that you can do. I'd just encourage you to make sure that you draw the curtains, you open the curtains in the morning, you open the windows.
Yeah.
Take time in the day to come and look outside the window to get some fresh air with the window open, and that will make a really big difference. The next part of lifestyle, and one of the pillars of health that we talked about earlier, is about exercise. So think about how active you are and how much you move your body. Research shows that doing as little as 10 minutes of aerobic exercise in a day can help the quality of your sleep. So it doesn't have to be a massive, well, we can't do gym sessions now, can we? But, it doesn't have to be going for a really long run or doing something that feels very strenuous. It can be a small amount of exercise or going for a walk. It is important, though, to remember to avoid doing any strenuous exercise too near to going to bed, because that can actually affect you falling asleep as well.
Okay.
The last part about lifestyle that I wanted to address was about what we put into our bodies. So think about your diet. Think about, do you have a healthy, balanced diet or not? Are you having a lot of sugar? Think about the foods that you're eating, and also try and think about when you're eating as well. So it's really important not to eat really heavy or spicy food too late at night or too near to when you're going to bed.
Okay. And as commented on earlier, just going back to the exercise, I guess, it can be really hard to do that when you are feeling tired and not sleeping well. But it's so good just to hear that it can just be 10 minutes of aerobic exercise, and that could be going for a walk. So it's good to sort of keep that as a motivation for those who are struggling with sleep and don't want to do that, but it's a good thing to do and it will help you. So that gives me a bit of hope that I can get out and do a small bit and it will be helpful. Can I also ask here about alcohol, just because I heard that it wasn't great to drink in the evening just because of the impact that alcohol can have on sleep?
I think that, it's a really important point, and something that I think is really important to talk about here, and that is that actually some of the things that we believe help us to sleep, in fact, harm our sleep, and alcohol is one of them. So many students I work with will say, well, if I drink a few glasses of wine, then actually I'm able to fall asleep much more quickly. I don't wake up in the night. Actually, alcohol is a sedative. So, it may feel like you're sleeping more, but actually what it does is it blocks your REM sleep or your dream sleep. And what that does is it prevents you from moving into that more restorative sleep. So you can wake up feeling quite unrested. The other thing is it's really important to think about caffeine and nicotine. So, some of the things that we use to manage our stress and maybe manage our tiredness actually with caffeine can have an impact on falling asleep. Caffeine and nicotine are both stimulants. So, having a coffee and a cigarette just before you're going to bed is going to have an impact on your ability to sleep. So I'm not here to say you should stop doing those things, but maybe just think about when you're doing it. So maybe restrict caffeine to the morning, have 2 cups of coffee instead of 8. And see if that makes a difference for you.
Yeah, it's really good as well just to think about alcohol, and it's just interesting that you mentioned it does feel like a sedative, or it can make people feel tired, so it feels like it's helping, but actually it's harming our ability to sleep easy. It's interesting just to reflect a little bit more on those things that we think are helping, but actually they're not.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to move on to the next tip, which is about your sleeping environment. So we've thought about our lifestyle and what we put into our body. And now I'd just really encourage you to think about your environment that you sleep in and how you can make it as conducive to sleeping as possible. How can you create a relaxing space that when you go into that room and you see your bed, it makes you want to sleep. So, one of the things to think about is the temperature of the room. We know that your body needs a drop in temperature to fall asleep. And also there's a lot of research that shows that we do actually sleep better in a cooler room, I think around 18, 19 degrees Celsius. So, think about the temperature of your room. Also, if possible, use your bed for only sleep and sex. Now, many of the students I work with use their bed for all sorts of other things. They might use it for, having a Zoom call with friends or eating or watching YouTube. I really acknowledge that it can be very difficult, particularly when you're living with parents or in shared accommodation, to restrict your whole bedroom to only sleep or sex, but maybe if you could just do that to your bed. And if you are studying in that room or doing other things, maybe think about how you can create some distinct areas or tidy away your books and laptops before you go to bed.
Yeah. And presumably that's because of the associations that we end up making. If we're doing all these things in our bed, then our brain struggles to really acknowledge, okay, it's time to go to sleep now, and naturally begin to wind down. Do you have any more tips for creating that calm, relaxing space? My friend has like a lavender spray that she uses, and perhaps that scent she associates with sleep.
Yeah, we know lavender is a calming scent. For different people, there may be different scents that make them feel calm. So I think using a scent is a great idea. There's lots of pillow sprays. I use one myself. Other ways would be to think about the lighting in your room. So if you go into your bedroom and it has really bright lights, you're not giving your brain that message that you need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Think about your mattress and your pillow. Are they actually comfortable? When did you last change them? Another thing as well is it's really important, if you can, to make your bed every morning. So you're really, you're kind of separating your bed and nighttime with your time being awake. And it feels much more inviting when it comes to going to bed.
Yeah. Do you know what? Making your bed is something that I've never thought would be an important part of the routine, but it does make a lot of sense, again, within this concept of associating your bed with sleep. So, yeah, of course, when you get up and you've sort of finished sleeping, making the bed, putting that away until you come back to it where you're going to be sleeping once again. So that's actually a really useful tip.
I mean, one last thing to say on that, is to think about napping, actually. Often when we're really tired, we haven't slept well, it can be quite tempting to nap during the day. And, if possible, it's best not to nap during the day. If you need to, maybe try and restrict how long you nap for. So actually, when it comes to going to bed, you actually feel tired.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to the next tip, and that is about your having a sleep routine and, remembering to wind down before bed. So we know that our natural body clock works best when things are predictable. So it's really important to try and go to bed and wake up at a similar time each day. So having that regular sleep-wake cycle really supports your natural circadian rhythm. It can help you fall asleep more quickly. So, think about what you can do to support yourself to do that. It might be an idea to set a go to bed alarm, just like you might set an alarm to wake yourself up in the morning. Have an alarm to remind yourself to turn off Netflix and go to bed, or at least try to start winding down.
Yeah.
I often think about how as children we have a bedtime routine. We might have a warm drink and a bath and read some books and settle down into a quiet environment. And it's always very important to have that kind of separation between your kind of busy, active day and your bedtime. And I think one of the things that happens in that transition from our childhood to our adulthood is that somehow we lose that. And what we're not doing is giving our bodies a chance to shift into sleep mode. So, think about what you can do. What can you do to help yourself feel more relaxed and ready for bed? Many students I work with will talk about finishing their studies or watching YouTube on their phones and then trying to sleep straight away, and they can't because their mind's racing.
It makes a lot of sense. So I also just wonder how many of us use our phones as sort of a vessel to get to sleep, thinking, okay, now I've done the work or the studying, and now this is my relaxation, this is what I do to wind down. And part of that could be an activity which is actually going to be harming your sleep. As you said, it probably doesn't help our mind and our body shift into that sleep mode.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really important point, and I think something that so many of us can relate to. I think using your phone in some ways, listening to a mindfulness or meditation session, that can be really helpful. I think what can be more problematic is if we're watching things on our phone or maybe scrolling through Instagram and we're having that blue light, that bright light that actually suppresses the sleep-inducing hormone melatonin. And melatonin, what it does is it actually signals to your body to feel tired. So if you're on your phone all of the time and it suppresses that release of melatonin, then actually it messes with your circadian rhythm. So, I just really encourage you to think about when do you switch off your computer, your TV, your phone? Would it feel possible the hour before bed to turn them off and do something that feels quite calming and relaxing? So maybe reading or drawing, having a bath, as I mentioned, doing some mindfulness, and see if it makes a difference. I think it's really about giving it a try and seeing if that will help.
Yeah. And it sounds like, from all the tips you've given, it really is about having that routine and prioritizing it, which is going to have the most effective impact. Winding down to sleep, turning off the screens, maybe like you said, setting an alarm an hour before, so you're thinking, right, now I'm really going to be invested in preparing for my sleep. And it just sounds that also just being consistent with this each night is a really good way to help yourself sleep better.
Absolutely.
So what do you do if you are doing all these things? Whether that's people watching who, currently do a lot of the things that we're talking about, or whether there's people here who maybe go away and try some of the things and they eventually get to bed, but they just cannot get to sleep. What's your advice for those people?
You raise a really important point, and I'm glad that you've asked me that question. I think one thing is to think about, what can you do in the day? So it's kind of going back a step. What can you do in the day to manage your stress and anxiety that might help you feel more relaxed when you're going to bed? So that might be about making sure you're exercising, connecting with friends, and just really thinking about what you can do that's going to help you feel more relaxed. Now, if you go to bed, you've been lying in bed for a while and you can't sleep, then often it's recommended, actually, rather than lying there for long periods of time, maybe get up, maybe after 20 minutes, if you can, go into another room, do something else, preferably not using your phone.
Yeah.
And, because the problem is, if you lie in bed for a long time not sleeping, your brain starts to associate being in bed with being awake, and that can be problematic. So, get up, do something else, and then when you feel tired again, try again, and do that as many times as you need to. And each time, treat it like it's a new bedtime.
Yeah.
And trust that you will be able to sleep. Another tip that I would give, or something that I would suggest can be helpful, is when you're going to sleep, it can be because you're struggling to sleep because you're overthinking. So you might have a lot of anxieties or worries, or you might have a big long list of things that you need to do. So it's not about getting rid of the thoughts that you have, but it's about, noticing the thoughts that you're having and then maybe writing them all down. And in some way, what that can do is help you download your thoughts into a piece of paper. And then when you go back to sleep, you know that you can look at that again in the morning. So that can be helpful.
Yeah. And I would imagine that for many, part of that overthinking is probably worrying about not getting rest or not getting enough sleep.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think this is where actually acceptance is really important. I think often what happens is we start fighting, and feeling really frustrated with the fact that we can't sleep. And of course, what that does is it makes us less able to sleep. So as hard as it may sound, I just, again, encourage that if you can't sleep, just accept that that's where you are. Try and let it go, and do some of the things that might help. And also trust the fact that you will fall asleep eventually.
Yeah.
I think sometimes one of the things that can be helpful is to find a way of coming out of our mind and into our body and our senses to really help us relax. So, you might use breathing techniques, or there's a technique called progressive muscle relaxation, where you tense different groups of muscles as you breathe in and you relax them as you breathe out, and you work on the different muscle groups in a particular order. What that can do is that can help you feel physically relaxed, but also, as I mentioned, it takes you out of your mind, out of your thoughts, and really into your body, and that can really help.
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, I have used progressive muscle relaxation before, and I did find it really surprisingly helpful. I wasn't expecting it, but it really did allow me to relax. And as you said, to get out of your head is quite an important thing to be able to do. I just also think it's a really great idea to, as you said, write things down, continue along that line of coming out of your mind and into your body and into your senses. And it's quite empowering to know that there are lots of these little things that we can be doing. We can change areas of our lifestyle to accommodate for better sleep habits. So when we make a change to our routine, or if we implement some of these tips, how long do you think it will take for us to see improvements? I know it's a big question, but I know myself, I get very impatient if I try something that I'm really hopeful is going to work, and first time I try it doesn't work, I'm so much less likely to stick at it and do it again. And so just, do you have any sort of tips for this?
Again, a really good question, and I think one that I'm sure lots of us can relate to, that impatience. I've tried all these different things and it's still not working.
Yeah.
I wish I could give you an exact time frame, and I'm not sure that I can. What I would say is that some people will start to notice changes straight away. Others, it may take slightly longer for their body clock to adjust. So, one thing I would say is, if you do notice positive changes, keep a record of it, perhaps, to remind yourself, these things are helping for me, these are working, and really try and persevere with it.
Yeah, that's great advice. So before we wrap up, do you have any last comments or advice that you would like to give to students on this topic?
Well, firstly, I want to acknowledge that we've covered a lot of different, a lot of areas today, a lot of information. So, if there was one thing that I would want students to take away from this episode, it would be really simply to try and prioritize your sleep. We have so many different demands, and it can be really difficult to do that. But actually, to get a good sleep will make responding to those demands much more possible.
Yeah.
There's a sleep expert called Dr. Guy Meadows. He's a physiologist. He is a co-founder of something called the Sleep School, but he also has a PhD in sleep disorders from Imperial College. So he's one of our own. And he describes sleep as being the most powerful performance enhancer known to humankind.
Wow.
So, I really like that description. And I would just encourage our students to remember that. When you're thinking, should I work through the night and not sleep? Just really trusting in the fact that actually, if you prioritize your sleep, it's going to help you study. It's going to help you feel better in your mental health, your physical health, and also in your productivity as well.
Yeah. Words of wisdom there to end on. Thank you so much, Leigh, for coming and onto Kind Mind series and talking to us about sleep. And there were so many tips there that I'll definitely be taking away. And to those watching, do remember that along with every video, we do include podcasts, apps, books, all on the website. So if you want to read further around this, then do go and check those out. And, we are making these videos for you, and we want to hear your feedback. Find out how you're enjoying the series, or if there are any topics that you'd really like us to do in the coming weeks. Do email us and let us know. So I'll say goodbye for now, and thanks again, Leigh.
Yeah, thank you.